And so I think that was the predicate to start this really magic moment in education freedom that we're seeing. And of course, ALEC and Committee to Unleash Prosperity have been instrumental in working with state legislators and all of the friendly education reform groups around the country. Because, I mean, we think that we can have 25 states, half of America, with education freedom by the end of 2025 because of this huge momentum that these ALEC legislators are really moving across the states on this. It's an essential issue.
If you don't know ALEC, they're an indispensable organization that represents several thousand state legislators around the country that are conservative-oriented, free market-oriented, believe in freedom, believe in federalism, believe in states' rights. And Jonathan is one of the smartest guys around in terms of what's happening in the states. So, Jonathan, thanks for joining. John Fund, I would like to start with you. This is a hot story. You may have seen at CPAC this morning that I attacked the AARP, and that is a group that is supposedly representing senior citizens, but I'm saying that they represent health insurance companies and they represent their own interests, not the interests of seniors. And I have been attacked by the Biden-Harris campaign, John Fund. They're saying Stephen Moore says that AARP is a bad organization, and he says that, Steve Moore wants to cut Social Security and Medicare, blah, blah, blah. So, John, you have been following this organization for probably 30 years. I'm sorry, I don't think the AARP really represents the interests of seniors. What say you?
AARP was founded in the 1940s by a retired school teacher who wanted to make sure that elderly people were as self-sufficient as possible, as well informed about saving for retirement as possible, and that they weren't going to be dependent on the measly Social Security checks the government was promising them. It has morphed into a giant medical industrial complex that sells everything from vitamins to Medicare Advantage plans. And there is nothing about AARP that is different from any other profit-making organization, except they have an IRS slip of paper claiming they are nonprofit.
Great point. How in the world is this a nonprofit organization? John, you're exactly right. And, I don't know if you were aware of this, John, but we've reported on this at the Committee to Unleash Prosperity in our hotline. They get $1 billion a year from United Health. Now, come on. How is that? That sounds like they're a functionary of the United Health, which, by the way, is one of the largest health insurance companies in America.
And by the way, Steve, full confession here. I am now 65 years old. I'm on Medicare. The only Medicare Advantage plan available to me in New York State is a United Healthcare plan, so I have to have an AARP plan unless I want to go to traditional Medicare.
That's because they've monopolized
it. Monopoly in many states.
They do. Jonathan Williams, thanks for joining. I want to get into some of the state issues. I don't know if you have anything to add about this AARP issue, but it's a hot thing. I mean, I've been attacked by the Biden campaign, but also a big story this week that really kind of breaks my heart, Jonathan, because you and I worked hard to try to get so many states to become right to work states. And right to work means that you can join a union if you want to. And it doesn't outlaw unions. It just basically says that that you can't be forced to join a union. That seems to be a pretty fundamental worker right. Unfortunately, states like New York and New Jersey are not right to work states. We won in Michigan. We turned Michigan, the cradle of unionism, into a right to work state. But I just got an email from you this morning saying that Michigan now has reversed course and they are returning to requiring workers in Michigan to join the union.
Well, it really is a travesty, Stephen. It's my home state in Michigan, so it's especially personal to me. But, right to work, this is just fundamentally American idea that we ought to be able to associate with whom we would like, right? I mean, as individuals, as workers, certainly as businesses across the United States. And this is not just good for individuals, right? And just from a freedom of association perspective, that you ought to have the dignity, whether you'd like to join something or not. It's actually, as we found, as you know, Steve, in our book, Rich States, Poor States every year, it matters greatly for economic growth and job creation. And the states that are right to work states are some of the fastest growing states in America. So this is a really bad deal for Michigan. And it's unfortunately part of a longer series of mistakes by current Liberal Governor Gretchen Whitmer, who I think is auditioning perhaps for some sort of a national Liberal platform, but it's going to have disastrous effects for Michigan.
It's a great point, Jonathan. And just I wanted to add one thing to that and get your reaction, which is that, and John Fund, I'd like your reaction to this as well, that, if you look at what's happened to the auto industry over the last 3 decades or so, we're not losing auto jobs in America. It's just Michigan is losing auto jobs because a lot of those jobs, the plants that used to be in places like Dearborn, Michigan, have moved to Texas, have moved to Florida, Alabama, South Carolina, states that are not forced union states. And so, it seems like this is going to be a blow to the auto jobs in the state of Michigan.
Well, no doubt it will. I mean, this is going to be clearly a problem for Michigan for the jobs and for population. And this is something that Governor Whitmer right now has a council put together to say growing Michigan together to try to ways to grow Michigan's population and keep young workers in the state. This does exactly the opposite of that because that's exactly right. Look at Tennessee, Alabama, Texas, those states that have lower taxes plus right to work is the magic formula for population growth, and especially with auto jobs recently.
Yeah, we found, John Fund, that in the report that Jonathan Williams was just talking about, that's called Rich States, Poor States. By the way, people can get that online, can't they, Jonathan?
That's right. richstatespoorstates.org and ALEC.org, and you can get a free copy.
So you'll see where your state ranks, and Michigan had been moving up, right, Jonathan? And now they're going to probably slide down in terms of their competitiveness.
Well, that's right. And when we started the publication, Michigan ranked 50th, dead last. I mean, we were in a single state recession, and then Governor Rick Snyder and real reformers in the Michigan legislature were elected in 2010 and turned that state around. And unfortunately, not all victories are permanent, and hopefully not all defeats are either after we found it with this right to work loss.
Yeah. So, John Fund, we found in our report that right to work states create about twice as many new jobs as non-right to work states. What do you make of that?
Well, my slight disagreement with Jonathan is this. I think that this is obviously bad economically for Michigan. Politically, though, it's like a corpse twitching, just as dramatically after it's expired. Union membership is in long-term decline. As a percentage of the workforce, it's now at a record low.
Yes.
And non-union jobs are growing far faster than union jobs.
That's true.
Because employers know to keep labor in this tight job market, they're going to have to provide benefits and salary that are commensurate. The union jobs did strangle, as Jonathan said, the auto industry because they weighed them down with rules, regulations, and costs. And the Japanese and the South Koreans and even the Germans for a long time ate our lunch. And that's why so many Americans are now running around in foreign cars because our car companies with bad planning and union regs priced themselves out of the market.
I'm going to be taking callers in about 15 minutes or so, and the issue of the day that I want to hear from our listeners from is, what do you think about right to work laws? Do you think New York is, John Fund, as you know, we reach an audience in Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Rhode Island, and other states in the Northeast, and most of them are forced union states. And I believe, John, that that's one of the things that's really caused the demise of the Northeast. I mean, if you look at this amazing statistic that the Southeast of America today, for the first time in history, is producing more output than the Northeast.
Yes. And by the way, despite this reversal in Michigan, I want to remind everyone in the audience that because of a Supreme Court decision a few years ago, if you're working in the public sector, you no longer have to pay union dues to subsidize politics that you disagree with. And all over the country, whether it's Wisconsin or whether it's Pennsylvania or whether it's even New York, hundreds of thousands of public sector union members are getting a pay raise. How are they getting the pay raise? They're taking the $1,000 or $1,200 a year that the unions demand in their dues and saying, no, I'm not paying it because it all goes to politics. It doesn't go to represent me.
That's John Fund, who is a political reporter with National Review. He spent more than 20, maybe 30 years with the Wall Street Journal, and also works with the Committee to Unleash Prosperity for our hotline. Jonathan, let's just switch gears for a minute. And can you give our listeners a little update on what is going on with what I think is maybe the most important issue of our time, which is school choice, allowing parents to choose their own kids for their schools. And we've got a lot of, I think, how many states did we get last year to enact school choice measures, Jonathan?
Well, it's really a magic moment for parents and parental empowerment and kids, because, I mean, we saw, nearly 10 states last year go to universal school choice plans. And up until a few years ago, we really had the starting plans in Wisconsin and Milwaukee that started back in the 90s. And of course, we had Florida and Arizona and a couple of states that have done some great things on school choice. But outside of those states, really didn't see much. And then, of course, what happened was COVID. And parents looked over their kids' laptops, and they were learning online. They were wondering what in the world they're being taught in many cases. And then you had people like down here in Virginia, Terry McAuliffe, running for governor against Glenn Youngkin, said, parents shouldn't be involved in their kids' education.
Right.
And that incensed people. Republicans, Democrats, Independents were incensed by that idea. And so I think that was the predicate to start this really magic moment in education freedom that we're seeing. And of course, ALEC and Committee to Unleash Prosperity have been instrumental in working with state legislators and all of the friendly education reform groups around the country, because, we think that we can have 25 states, half of America, with education freedom by the end of 2025 because of this huge momentum that these ALEC legislators are really moving across the states on this. It's just a central issue.
Yeah. John Fund. So I think a lot of people who are learning about school choice might believe what the teachers unions say, John, which is that this is going to, if we give parents money to send their kids to alternative schools, that this will hurt the public schools. What do you say about that, John?
Well, first of all, the money that goes to charter schools or to parents who are going to put kids into schools of their own choice is a fraction of what the public schools get right now.
That's true. That's true.
So in actual practice, the public schools, if someone leaves them and goes to an alternative school, the public school gets more money.
Right.
So how much good have they done with that in the last 30 years? We have doubled in real terms, beyond inflation. In real terms, we have doubled the expenditure on public education, and we are getting fewer good results, not more.
So, Jonathan, as I look at some of these programs, and I've been to a lot of these charter schools, and sometimes the money goes to Catholic schools or Jewish schools or Montessori schools. It's just amazing to see the performance of the kids in these classrooms, when you have discipline and when you have real high standards and basically a classical curriculum. And isn't it true, Jonathan? Because when I go to these schools, it's a lot of Hispanic kids, Black kids, kids with low incomes. It seems to me that Democrats should be in favor of this if they care about these kids of color.
Well, absolutely. And I think to some extent, that's such a good point, but to some extent, Democrats, when you look at polling, are very supportive. The rank and file Democrats, especially within inner cities, whereas you've reported, Steve, in our Education Freedom Alliance that we're all members of, pushing this idea of education freedom. You've reported that, look at Baltimore, look at New York City, look at Detroit, back home in Michigan. They're spending more than $30,000, maybe $35,000 per year per child, and getting zero actually at grade level in some cases at reading and math. So the idea of just teaching kids basic reading, writing, and math and American history and some basic ideas, is revolutionary in these charter programs and these religious programs, to John's point, at a fraction of the cost of public education, and yet seeing the results. This is something that has the ability to blow apart partisan lines. The only vested interest group, you talk about, AARP earlier, it's the teachers unions when it comes to fighting to keep these kids in failing schools in many cases. And that's the travesty of it.
That's Jonathan Williams, who is the chief economist. Hold on, John. Chief economist with ALEC, and as working with us on the school choice issue. ALEC is an indispensable organization. And I want to just clarify one thing because I misspoke. When I said Democrats are opposed to this, Jonathan, you made a good point. Democratic voters are in favor of this. It's the Democratic politicians, John Fund, who are basically in the hip pocket, unfortunately, of the teachers' unions. Well,
there's also one other point. In inner cities where our schools are the worst and where minority kids are failing, and of course, if minority kids don't get a good education, they often are prey to criminal behavior and, wasting their lives. It's a tragedy.
Yep.
40%, Steve, of inner city public school teachers in every city after city, Chicago, Philadelphia, Milwaukee, Detroit, they send their kids to non-public schools. What do they know that the rest of us don't? Yeah. They know the schools don't work. They won't even send their own kids there.
That's John Fund, formerly of the Wall Street Journal, now with the Committee to Unleash Prosperity, and Jonathan Williams, who is with ALEC. Guys, thank you so much. Great stuff today.